Good morning. Continuing with Tractate Eruvin, chapter 2 is the name of the chapter is Oisin Pasim. We're holding by 20b1 in the Schattenstein edition, and we'll start with the right column. The Gemara rejects this proof by suggesting an alternative explanation of the Mishnah. The Gemara says, "Loi, no. Perhaps the Mishnah requires most of the animal to be inside only. Most of the animal to be inside the well enclosure.
Right.
The nokit mano v'lo nokit lo, when he holds the container for the animal to drink, but does not hold the animal itself. But if he holds the animal, there is no need for most of it to be inside." Going to the text, v'chi nokit mano v'lo nokit lo mishori, when he holds the container, but does not hold the animal, is it permitted? V'atanyo lo yamalo odom mayim veitim b'Shabbos lifnei behemtoi. A person may not draw water and place it on the Shabbos before his animal to drink while he holds the container. Aval, what's the way to do it? Memalehu v'shoifech vehi shoisem eleo. However, he may draw water, pour it into a trough, and let the animal drink it by itself. Don't hold the container. Now let's go to the text. Ha'it maralo, but it was stated with regard to that price. Omar Abaye, here we are discussing a case in which a trough stand trough. Right, trough. I just said trough and you said trough. Okay. No, I'm happy you corrected. In which a trough stands in the Reshus Rabbi, and the trough is at least 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim wide, 10 by 4. Right. And one end of the trough extends into the area within the boards. You can see the diagram, beautiful. The brisa should be understood as follows: a person may not fill a container from the well, hold it over the end of the trough nearest the well, and then walk back to his animal standing at the far end while carrying the container over the top of the trough. He is only permitted to pour the water from the container into the end of the trough, which is within the well enclosure, and let the water flow to his animal. You understand? Instead of holding it, just pour it to the trough where she is drinking from, and finish. He might notice that the trough is defective and its end in the Reshus Rabim, and go to adjust it. Taking the bucket with him, and he end up carrying from a private domain into Reshus Rabim, into a public domain. In such a case, even if he goes to repair the trough and he puts the bucket down in the Reshus Rabim, would he be liable for violating a biblical prohibition? Rav Safra said in the name of Rabbi Ami, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, if one who was moving things from one corner to another corner in Reshus HaYochid, in a private domain, without any intention of taking them outside, he moved things inside a room, private domain, and then after he picked them up, he changed his mind. He's not going anymore from corner to corner, rather he's going from Reshus HaYochid, from private domain to Reshus Rabim. In such a case, Potur is exempt. Why? Because the originally picking up the item was not made for the purpose with the intention of taking it into Reshus Rabim. So there's no akira. The fact that he ended up putting it in Reshus Rabim, it's only hanacha. He didn't do the two necessary acts in order to be liable. Okay? Because when he picked it up, he thought, I'm just moving this cup from one corner to another corner. But then after I already picked it up, I said, hey, why should I put it here? Let me put it outside. And so what did I do? Hanacha. But the akira was done with the right intention, in a permissible way. So therefore, it's not liable. Ella zimnin the going to the right column. It says zimnin the he might repair the trough and pick up the bucket which he had put down in Reshus Rabim. and then put it on the trough. As a result, he would be liable for carrying from Reshus Harabim from private domain into Reshus Hayachid. So over here, speaking about a case where he might be taking it back from public to private domain. Some say that the question was asked as follows: Gab Odom, with regard to a person who stands in one domain while drinking in another. Again, standing in one domain, drinking in another domain. Why? Because his head is sticking out. Let's say your head is sticking out from your window outside. That's outside is Reshus Harabim. Your window is inside is Reshus Hayachid, and you're drinking. We have said from the Mishnah that for him to drink, it is enough if his head and most of his body are inside the domain in which he drinks. Gabe Pora, however, with regard to a cow that stands partially in Reshus Harabim, while being given water in Reshus Hayachid, the cow's in Reshus Harabim, but you're giving it water in Reshus Hayachid. Is it sufficient for its head and most of its body to be inside the Reshus Hayachid or not? Where the person watering the animal holds the container from which the animal drink, and also hold the animal so that it cannot turn out to the Reshus Harabim. There should be no question that there should be no question to you that it is sufficient for its head and most of its body to be inside the Reshus Hayachid. You need his body and his head to be like the Mishnah said. It needs to be Reshus Hayachid. Rather, the case in which you should inquire about is where he holds the container but does not hold the animal. Now, what is the law in this case? May he give it to drink or not? Omar lei tenisua. You have learned the answer to this question in the Mishnah, which states, "Ubilvad sheloi te roisha v'rubam b'fnim v'shoiso." The post may be placed close to the well, provided that enough space remains for a cow to stand with its head and most of its body inside the enclosure to drink. Does this not refer Does this not refer even to a case in which he holds the container but does not hold the animal? We see from this that standing with its head and most of it suffices even to permit giving an understanding an under-strained animal to drink. You see that? We see from this that standing with its head and most of its body inside the enclosure suffices even. No, the Mishnah's requirement is to enable one to water animals. The nokit monovenokit lo, where he holds a container and holds the animal, and this seems the likely explanation as well. The nokit monovenokit lo, because if the Mishnah's requirement of this amount of space for a well enclosure is to permit the case in which he holds the container and does not hold the animal, mishori, would it be permitted for him to water the animal in this enclosure at all? V'atanyo and a person may not draw water and place it before his animal for it to drink while he holds a container. However, he may draw water, pour it into a trough, and let the animal drink by itself. But it was stated with regard to that. Here we are discussing a case in which a trough stands in Reshus Harabim. The height of it is 10 tefachim, the width is 4 tefachim, and one of its ends extend into the area within the boards. Accordingly, the brisa should be understood as follows: a person may not fill a container from the well and carry it over the trough, the animal's container. He is only permitted to pour the water from the container into the end of the trough nearest the well and let the water flow to his animal. This prohibition was enacted by the rabbis because they were concerned Zimnin the chozilo levels the mekalkal. He might sometimes notice that the trough is defective at its end in the Rishus Harabim, and he will come to adjust it. Taking the bucket with him, will take it from private to public domain. And in such a case, even if he does go to repair the trough and puts the bucket down in the Rishus Harabim, would he be liable? The Gemara now brings the same case that we discussed before in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Safra in the name of Rabbi Ami, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the one who carries objects from one private domain to another private domain. And then Nimlach Alein V'Yitzion, then he decided to go and put it outside in Rishus Harabim. He's in Rishus HaYochid. He's holding an object, is now thinking instead of putting it in the room in another place in Rishus HaYochid, he takes it to Rishus Harabim. The Gemara says, Potur is exempt. Why? Because that was not his initial intention. Ella, so why in the case of a trough he would be liable? Ella says, in the Mesakin law, he might repair the trough, and puts it down, and then brings it back from Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYochid, and that was the concern. Next case, if a camel has its head and most of its body inside an enclosure. The camel is inside the enclosure. One may stuff it with food inside the enclosure. I don't know why you're stuffing a camel, but you may stuff the camel inside the enclosure. Now, stuffing an animal with food is equivalent to watering an animal. What's the difference between watering and stuffing it with food? Holding the container and holding the animal. Because the animal has to be held for food to be forced down its throat. And yet we require that the animal's head and most of his body is within this enclosure. He says the camel is different because its neck is long and its head could reach the Rishus Harabim even though he is holding it. The rabbis did not permit fitting it unless most of the camel is also inside the Rishus HaYochid enclosure. If an animal has its head and most of its body inside an enclosure, one may stuff it with food inside the enclosure. Now, stuffing an animal with food is equivalent to watering an animal while holding the container and holding the animal, because the animal has to be held for food to be forced down its throat. Yet we require that the animal head and most of its body be inside the enclosure. What is the animal to which the Brisa, like the previous one, refers? A camel, referring to a camel. And it has already been established that a camel is an exceptional case because it has a long neck. But one Brisa speaking about animal doesn't specify, and one Brisa teaches camel. This implies that the Brisa which uses the term animal refers to animals in general, not only camels, not only animals that have a long neck. Mide gabe adodetanya, where these Brisas taught together. The Gemara says these Brisas were not taught together. Rabbi Elazar prohibits stuffing in the case of a camel because its neck is long. Well boards, the boards around the well were not permitted except for the benefit of the pilgrims, those who are traveling to Shalim, to allow them to draw water from well. But regular people should not use it. But 1 second, there's another Brisa that tells us that it's only permitted, those well boards are only permitted to a case where only animals, not even those who, not the pilgrims, not those who are traveling to Shalim. My Bema, which animals? Bema Zola Golim, which animals? The animals of the pilgrims, not even a regular animal. Aval Odom, but a person, a pilgrim himself who wishes to drink from a well, Metapes Vela, Metapes Yod, must climb up and climb down into the well itself and drink there. Buchim Tiu. Thank you so much for listening.